Alright, so Johnny Somali, who's the nuisance streamer, has been facing a lot of legal problems in South Korea because of the crazy things that he's done there. And recently, he just had another trial day. And so we're gonna be taking a look at the details of that. And let's just say it's really not looking good for him. Alright, so we're gonna be taking a look at a video from the channel Legal Mindset. And the name of this video is Lawyer Explains Somali's Trial Disaster. Fast facts. So let's check this out.
Now we're going to talk about the other things that he pled guilty to. So previously, Ramsey had pled not guilty to the Lotte World charge. That is going into Lotte World, causing a scene, disrupting the ride, causing the ride to close. So we had a huge surprise today. We thought the witness for today was going to be Bong Bong. Everybody thought that, myself included. And you know what? I was wrong. Look at that. I'm admitting I was wrong here. It was actually the witness that was a staff woman from Lotte World who repeatedly told Ramsey not to film. She was actually quite disturbed by the fact that he would not stop filming. But you can see in her face that she was not happy about it. And she showed up. And Ramsey changed his plea to guilty on the Lotte World charge. He may have been gambling that the Lotte World witness would no-show and saying, okay, if the witness no-shows, then okay, we can go in not guilty because she's going to no-show and not be there. However, she showed up and was highly motivated to be there. He now has six confirmed guilty charges. 4 obstruction of business and 2 minor crimes act. So he is a confirmed repeat offender, repeat criminal with all of these. And once again, each charge stacks up the amount of time he can be in jail. At this point, the maximum is 12 years. However, even the default, even the standard punishment would be over 4 years in jail. Even if they don't give him the aggravated maximum of 12 years, the standard, the non-aggravated, is 4 years and some change in terms of months. So even not counting the deepfakes, this is very, very serious.
All right, so really bad stuff for Johnny Somali right here. So basically, there was this incident where Johnny Somali went to this theme park in South Korea called Lotte World. And he went there and he started causing problems. And this was the Lotte World charge that was being mentioned in the clip, right? So he was being charged because of that incident. And so originally, he was actually pleading not guilty to this charge. However, what ended up happening was that a witness from that incident, who was a Lotte World staff woman, she ended up coming in as a witness on the trial day. And so once he saw that, he was like, oh, okay, actually, the witness is here, let's just go ahead and plead guilty on this. So now he's ended up pleading guilty on this charge as well. Okay, so now he, you can't even defend yourself saying, I didn't do it once you yourself plead guilty, And in that clip, Legal Mindset also in his bullet points, he has this bullet point that says that, maybe Johnny Somali was hoping that the witness would not show up. And so he would just plead not guilty. But, he ended up pleading guilty because the witness did show up. And so now with this pleading guilty, now what's ended up happening is that overall, he's ended up pleading guilty to a total of 6 charges, dude. This is absolutely insane right here. And this includes 4 obstruction of business charges and then 2 minor offenses act charges. So, dude, this is absolutely wild. I still remember back when I was covering all the crazy stuff Johnny Somali was doing in South Korea initially, and things hadn't escalated to this point. Back then, Johnny Somali had this attitude that he'd be able to just get away with everything and all that. And now fast forward to now and take a look at how he himself has had to plead guilty to 6 charges. And the crazy thing, as I mentioned earlier, is that once you plead guilty, you can't even make some kind of argument that you didn't do it. You yourself have now said to the court that, hey, yeah, actually, I admit I did do this. And so now, you're gonna have to face consequences for that. And then the discussion becomes, okay, what will the consequences be? So the discussion shifts away from whether or not you'll face any kind of consequences. Now it's okay, well, how severe are they gonna be, And another thing is that now at this point, given these 6 charges that he has, the aggravated maximum now is actually 12 years in prison. And even if they don't give him the maximum, then the standard punishment is still 4 years in prison. So yeah, pretty crazy situation that Johnny Somali's gotten himself into. Now real quick, I'd just like to say that it would really help me out if you would subscribe to my channel, because I am trying to grow this channel, and so subscriptions truly do help with that. Now anyway, back to the video. Now let's take a look at another clip from the same video.
So now we have it here, like we said, 4 guilty for the obstruction of business, guilty on the Minor Crimes Act, and not guilty on the deepfake. These are his pleas. Of course, he's going to have to fight this at the next trial, and I do believe there's sufficient evidence to find him guilty on the deepfake counts. We're going to talk about that next. But now we know the 4th count is for the bus North Korean propaganda, the loud music, so we know what's going on here. So he's kind of got 2 obstructions for the bus, one for Lotte World and one for 7-Eleven. This is not just about a cup of noodles, folks. This is much more than a cup of noodles.
All right, so as you just saw, that's a lot of charges right there, okay? And so in total, if you take a look at the charges, there's 8 charges in total. And then, as we discussed earlier, he's pled guilty to 6 charges, okay? So then there's 2 left where he's pleading not guilty. And so these 2 ones are the deepfake ones. And so there's the deepfake count 1 charge and the count 2 charge. And so for these, he's still saying that he's not guilty. Let's see where this goes. But man, just something about seeing this like table sort of, and just visually seeing the situation that Johnny Somali's gotten himself into is just crazy, dude. Like, just reading all of this is so insane. Like, this whole list, there's like these charges, and so you can read like the descriptions of them. So you got like disrupting 7-Eleven, disrupting bus system, disrupting a ride at Lotte World. That's what we discussed earlier. And then there's another like bus related incident, and then there's the fish related incident, then there's the loud music one. And dude, this is just crazy. And then there's 2 more in addition to this. And so, yeah, dude, it's just absolutely insane. I bet Johnny Somali was not thinking that, he'd actually end up getting into legal trouble because of all this. But, here we are, man. Like, it's crazy, I think his luck really is running out. South Korea ended up being like kind of like the boss battle for him. He ended up not being able to get out of this situation, just kind of like how he got out of crazy situations like these in the past. And he didn't have to deal with consequences back then, but this time you can see how he's stuck now, dude. And to be honest, man, like, a part of me is kind of like surprised that it took this long, right? Because South Korea is not the only country where he's done this thing where he goes there and he becomes this like nuisance streamer and he starts doing all these crazy things. But rather, he's done this in other countries as well. One of them is Japan. And in all the instances where he's done crazy stuff like this in the past, despite how crazy he used to be and how much the local populations there really did not like this guy, he ended up getting away with it in the past. However, in South Korea, it seems like this is the time when, he's finally gonna be facing some kind of consequences. Alright, so now let's watch another clip from that video.
Going on, let's talk about the deepfakes. And the deepfake is the crime that Johnny Somali fears the most. He's scared to death because this is one that absolutely carries prison time right off the bat. The statute will not allow for fines. It's straight to prison, no other option. Now, the deepfake was a disaster for Johnny's defense. They pretty much confessed. Let's talk about this. So Ramsey's lawyer argued that Ramsey doesn't know how to make a deepfake, that he is incompetent to make a deepfake, which, look, we all know that's BS. It takes 2 seconds to make a deepfake. There's AI, there's other mechanisms. Anybody can make a deepfake, and Ramsey is certainly capable of it. But beyond that, that's what the lawyer said makes him innocent. The lawyer said he didn't make it, so because he didn't make it, he's innocent. But the prosecutor immediately countered, once again, getting up there, getting in their face. Great job by the prosecution. Amazing performance. Said, so you deny making the deepfake, but you admit, you confess to distributing, which is publishing the deepfake. Ramsey's lawyer said, well, He admits distribution, but denies production. So saying he confesses that he distributed, but denies production. But the bombshell admission is the admission of guilt as to production. It's not relevant. The only thing that's relevant is that Ramsey distributed or published it, meaning whether or not Ramsey made it is irrelevant.
Alright, so as you just saw, the deepfake charges are really serious, because the thing about them is that once you get charged with them, you go straight to prison. Okay, so that's why Johnny Somali is worried about these. And so, we're gonna have to take a look at the next trial day, and they're gonna have like a back and forth, and the legal procedure is gonna continue, and so they're gonna like conclude the deepfake charges, because he's already ended up pleading guilty to the other ones, the 6 ones that I mentioned earlier. So if he ends up getting charged for these 2 as well, then dude, I think it's gonna stack up to be some like really horrible prison time for this guy. But anyway guys, those were just my thoughts on the situation, and now I'm interested in hearing what you think down in the comments below. And with all that being said guys, this is Alexi, signing out.